The phone rang late Tuesday afternoon while I was buried in quarterly reports in my downtown office. The unknown number flashing on the screen almost went unanswered, but something in my gut told me to pick it up. "Hello, is this Sophia Martinez?" The woman's voice on the other end was polite, practiced, yet carried a hint of hesitation. "Yes, this is Sophia," I replied, curious. "Hi, I'm Jennifer Walsh from Pristine Events. I'm the wedding planner for your brother David's wedding at the Ocean View Grand Resort." My hand froze midair, coffee cup hovering just above the table. David. I hadn't spoken to him in months, not since our last disastrous family dinner, where he made it perfectly clear I wasn't welcome at family gatherings anymore. The silence that followed his outburst that night had stretched for half a year now, heavy and unbroken. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone even. "All right, Jennifer. What can I do for you?" Her voice grew more careful. "This is a little awkward, but I received a call from your parents this morning. They asked me to remove you from the guest list completely." She hesitated, then added softly, "They said, and I'm quoting here, she's not family anymore and isn't needed at this celebration." For a long moment, I didn't move. My eyes drifted toward the vast city skyline outside my floor-to-ceiling windows. I let her words hang there, cold and sharp, before I finally spoke. "I see. And what did you tell them?" "I told them I'd handle it professionally," she replied. "I'm personally calling all affected guests. I'm really sorry, Miss Martinez. I can imagine that was painful to hear." "That's very thoughtful of you, Jennifer," I said, my voice calm though my chest felt tight. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you satisfied with the Ocean View Grand Resort so far? Are they meeting your expectations for the wedding?" She seemed caught off guard by my question. "Oh, yes, absolutely. It's one of the most beautiful venues we've ever worked with. The staff has been wonderful. The facilities are world-class. We were lucky they had an opening for next Saturday. They're usually booked solid months ahead." "That's wonderful to hear. I'm glad my brother chose such a lovely place." As soon as I ended the call, I opened my phone's contacts and tapped the name I needed. "Jennifer, I need to make a quick call," I said politely. "Can I call you back in 10 minutes? "Of course. And again, I'm so sorry about all this." The moment the line disconnected, my tone shifted. I dialed my assistant. "Maria," I said crisply, "get me Jonathan Pierce at Ocean View Grand Resort. Now. Right away, Ms. Martinez." Within minutes, Jonathan's familiar voice came on the line. As the general manager of the flagship property in my resort chain, he was someone who always understood the subtext behind my calls. "Sophia, I got your message. You wanted to review an event scheduled for this weekend?" "That's right, Jonathan. The Martinez wedding." He paused briefly. "How would you like me to handle it?" "I want you to call the wedding planner, Jennifer Walsh from Pristine Events, and inform her that due to a last-minute scheduling conflict, the resort will have to cancel the Martinez wedding. Full refund of all deposits, of course. Explain that the property has been reserved for a corporate buyout event requiring the entire facility." "Understood," he replied professionally. "Should I offer alternative dates?" "No. Make it clear that we're unable to accommodate this client for any future booking, not at this resort, not at any of our properties. And Jonathan," I added, glancing at my watch, "ensure the other 6 Ocean View resorts are notified of the same." "I'll take care of it immediately. Anything else?" "Yes. When you speak to Ms. Walsh, let her know the decision came directly from the chain's owner. Don't elaborate further." "Of course, Sophia. Consider it done." When I hung up, I felt a quiet calm settle over me, not anger, not bitterness, just an eerie stillness. I returned to my reports as though nothing had happened. Exactly 8 minutes later, my phone rang again. "Miss Martinez," Jennifer's voice came through, tense. "I just got the strangest call from the resort." "Oh, what happened?" I asked, my tone neutral. "They're canceling the wedding. Completely. They said a corporate event suddenly requires the entire property. I've never had anything like this happen before, not in 12 years of planning weddings." "That's terrible," I said smoothly. "What did they tell you exactly?" The general manager said the decision came directly from the chain's owner. He was very polite but firm. No new dates, no other properties, nothing. I have a wedding for 200 guests in 5 days and no venue. That does sound like a challenge, I said sympathetically. Did they offer any other explanation? Just that it was a corporate-level decision. Miss Martinez, she hesitated. Your last name, it's Martinez. Like the wedding? Yes, I said evenly. David Martinez is my brother. Oh my God. She exhaled sharply. Forgive me if this sounds strange, but do you, by any chance, know anyone associated with this resort chain? Anyone who might help us understand what just happened? I couldn't help the small smile that tugged at my lips as my eyes drifted to the framed photograph on my desk, the one from the ribbon-cutting ceremony 3 years ago when I acquired the Ocean View chain. Jennifer, I said gently, can I share something with you? Of course, anything that helps. The corporate buyout they mentioned? I paused, letting the silence draw out. That would be my company. I'm the owner of the Ocean View resort chain. The line went completely still. For nearly 10 seconds, there wasn't a sound. You own the chain? All 7 properties, she whispered. Yes. I purchased them 3 years ago through my hospitality investment firm. But your family, they said, she trailed off uncertainly. They said what, Jennifer? That you weren't doing well. That you had unrealistic dreams. Your parents told me you were finally starting to be more realistic about your limitations. I laughed softly, not unkindly. Jennifer, would you mind doing something for me? Of course, anything. Could you conference my brother into this call? I think it's time to clear up some confusion in the family. Jennifer hesitated for a moment, clearly unsure how to proceed, but I could hear her fumbling with her phone. A few clicks later, another voice joined the line, one that instantly made my heart tighten. Hey, Jennifer, what's going on? You said there was a problem with the resort. David's tone was impatient, dismissive, the same clipped voice I'd grown up hearing whenever he was about to lecture me. Yes, David, she said carefully. I'm on the line with someone who can explain what's happening. This is Miss Sophia Martinez. There was a pause so heavy it almost hummed through the air. I could picture the exact look on his face, the sudden flicker of discomfort he got whenever someone challenged his control. Sophia, he said finally, his tone sharp and wary. What the hell are you doing talking to my wedding planner? Good afternoon to you too, David, I replied evenly. I just thought we should clear up a small misunderstanding. Jennifer's voice came back, clearly nervous now. David, the resort called earlier. They said the entire wedding has been cancelled due to a corporate buyout. The owner herself authorized it. Yes, I said softly, and that owner happens to be me. For a few seconds, there was only silence. I could practically feel the confusion turning into realization. What are you talking about? He said finally, his voice laced with disbelief. I own Ocean View Resorts, I said plainly. All 7 of them, including the one where you were supposed to have your wedding. That's impossible, he snapped. You work in marketing or something, you don't have that kind of money. I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. You always assumed I was failing, David. You never asked what I was actually building. Jennifer stayed silent, I could sense she didn't dare hang up. I took a deep breath and continued, my tone still calm but firmer now. 3 years ago, my firm acquired Ocean View Grand and its entire chain. We rebranded, remodeled, and made it the highest-rated luxury resort company in the region. You were about to have your wedding on my property, booked through my team, and then your fiancé's family decided I wasn't family enough to attend. So, when I got the call that I'd been removed from the guest list, I paused for effect, letting the moment sink in. I decided it was only fair that the resort remove your wedding from ours. Unbelievable, he hissed. You're doing this out of spite. No, I said softly, I'm doing this out of principle. You and your fiancé made a very public point of cutting me out of your life, and that's fine, David. But you don't get to insult me and still profit off my hard work. Not at my table, not in my home, and certainly not in my business. Jennifer tried to interject, her tone apologetic. Miss Martinez, maybe we could. It's all right, Jennifer, I said gently. You've done your job. I'll handle it from here. There was a sound like a frustrated sigh on David's end. You always have to make everything about you, don't you? I laughed softly, shaking my head. No, David. For once, I made it about me because you never did. Do you know how many years I worked late nights, trying to prove to everyone, especially you, that I could make something of myself? You said I'd never survive in business without your help. You told me I was chasing fantasies. But now, here we are, your wedding cancelled by the failure you dismissed. He didn't reply, but the silence spoke volumes. Jennifer's voice came back, tentative. Mr. Martinez, I'm afraid I'll need to start calling backup venues immediately. The refund should be processed by the end of the day, but with such short notice, most luxury resorts will be fully booked. David muttered something under his breath, the sound of a man realizing the consequences of his own arrogance. Jennifer, I said softly, don't trouble yourself too much. I'll make sure you're compensated for the inconvenience. Your professionalism today has been appreciated. Her relief was almost audible. Thank you, Miss Martinez. I truly didn't mean to get caught in the middle of this. You didn't, I reassured her. You were just the messenger. After we hung up, the silence that filled my office wasn't empty, it was steady, like the calm after a storm. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small when I thought of my brother. I didn't feel like the quiet one sitting at the end of the dinner table while he and our parents discussed success as if it belonged only to him. I simply felt free. That night, as I sat by the window of my apartment overlooking the city lights, memories from our childhood floated through my mind, the shared birthdays, the laughter, the rivalry that had always been more about control than affection. My parents had always seen him as the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, while I was the dreamer who needed to grow up. And maybe that's why it felt so strangely peaceful now, to know I didn't need their approval anymore. My phone buzzed again around 10 that evening. It was a text from an unknown number. David, you didn't have to humiliate me like that. You ruined everything. I stared at the message for a moment, then replied simply. I didn't ruin anything, David. I just reminded you whose ground you were standing on. He didn't respond after that. The next morning, my assistant Maria entered my office with a hesitant expression. Ms. Martinez, she said, your mother's online too. She sounds upset. I smiled faintly. Of course she does. Put her through. The line clicked, and my mother's voice came through, sharp and trembling. Sophia, how could you do this to your brother? Do you realize the embarrassment you've caused our family? I leaned back in my chair, my tone calm and measured. Good morning to you too, Mom. I assume David's already told you what happened. He's heartbroken, she snapped. Everyone is talking about it. You cancelled his wedding venue, and for what? Because you weren't invited? I took a deep breath. No, Mother. I cancelled it because you and your son made it clear that I wasn't family anymore. So I made sure your words were respected. I stayed out of it. Completely. There was silence on the other end. Then, quieter, she asked, you really own that place? I own the entire chain, I said simply. Every property, every share, every decision. She exhaled shakily. I didn't know. I know, I said softly. You never asked. For a long time, my mother didn't say anything. I could hear her quiet breathing on the line, the weight of realization settling in. Then, finally, her voice broke the silence, softer this time, almost uncertain. Sophia, why didn't you ever tell us? About the company, about all this. I turned my chair toward the window, watching the city stretch endlessly below. Because it wouldn't have mattered. You never wanted to hear anything that didn't fit the version of me you already believed in. The day I told you I wanted to start my own business, you laughed. You said I should just find something stable, like David. Every time I tried to share an achievement, you found a way to dismiss it. That's not fair, she protested weakly. We only wanted what was best for you. No, Mom, I said quietly. You wanted what was easiest for you. You didn't want to believe that your daughter could build something bigger without your approval. You and Dad treated me like I was a disappointment who didn't know her place. You let David mock me for years, you stood by every time he turned my dreams into a joke. There was a heavy pause. I could hear her trying to hold back tears, but her voice trembled. We never meant to hurt you, Sophia. Families say things in the moment. I know, I said gently. But some words stick forever. When David told me I wasn't family anymore, and you didn't stop him, that's when I realized I didn't need to fight for a place at your table. I'd build my own instead. The line went quiet again. Then she whispered, "You sound just like your father when you talk like that." I smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. Maybe. But the difference is, I built mine with compassion, not control. For a long time, we didn't speak. I could feel her guilt through the silence, that mix of shame and disbelief that comes when old truths finally surface. When she spoke again, her voice was small, like a child's. "David's devastated, you know. The venue was everything to him." "I'm sure it was," I said calmly. "But maybe it's time he learns that actions have consequences. You can't insult and exclude people, then expect their support when it's convenient." "I just wish you'd found another way," she whispered. "I did, Mom. I found peace." When the call ended, I sat there for a while, staring out at the skyline. The city was alive with lights, 1,000 stories unfolding below me, and for the first time in years, I felt like mine finally belonged to me. Over the next few days, the story spread through the family like wildfire. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly calling, some out of curiosity, others pretending to check on me. Everyone wanted to know if it was true, if I had really cancelled my brother's wedding. Yes, I told them simply, I did. But not out of revenge, out of self-respect. Still, gossip traveled faster than truth. By the end of the week, the whispers had turned into rumors that I'd done it to humiliate him, that I wanted attention, that I was jealous. None of it mattered. I knew my truth. On the morning of what should have been his wedding day, I received another call. This time, it wasn't David or my parents, it was someone unexpected. "Miss Martinez," a warm, familiar voice said. "It's Jonathan from Ocean View Grand." "Yes, Jonathan," I replied. "Everything all right at the resort?" "Perfectly fine, I just thought you should know something. Mr. Martinez's fiancé's family came by earlier this morning. They wanted to see if they could at least hold a small ceremony here privately. When we explained the property was unavailable, they became, well, quite unpleasant." I chuckled softly. "I can imagine." He hesitated. But something interesting happened. The bride, Emily, she stayed behind after her parents stormed out. She apologized to our staff, said she hadn't known the full story. She seemed genuinely upset. That caught my attention. "Did she leave any message for me?" "Yes, actually. She asked if I could tell you that she's sorry. She said, 'Your brother never told me who you really are. If I had known, I would have wanted you there.'" I was silent for a moment, processing that. Then I sighed. "Thank you, Jonathan. That means more than you think." After we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. It was strange, for all the hurt that had been exchanged, that small apology felt like a sliver of healing. Maybe not enough to erase everything, but enough to remind me that not everyone around my brother shared his arrogance. That evening, I went for a walk along the waterfront near my penthouse. The air smelled of salt and possibility. I thought about Emily, a young woman probably caught between loyalty and confusion, unsure how to navigate a family war she never asked for. And I thought about David, probably fuming somewhere, surrounded by people who only told him what he wanted to hear. When I got home, a single email waited in my inbox. The subject line read, "From David." I hesitated before clicking it. "Sophia. You made your point. I get it. You're successful. You're powerful. Congratulations. But did you really have to destroy my wedding to prove it? I'll admit, I didn't expect this from you. You always acted so moral, so above it all. I guess power changes people. David." I stared at the words for a long moment, then began typing a reply. "David. Power doesn't change people. It reveals them. I didn't destroy your wedding, I just refused to lend my work to people who disrespected me. You called me unworthy, And yet you wanted to stand on my foundation. That's hypocrisy, not love. I don't need you to congratulate me. I needed you to believe in me. But since that was too much to ask, I learned to believe in myself. Sophia. I didn't know if he'd read it or not. But pressing send felt like closing a chapter I'd been stuck in for years. That night, I slept better than I had in a long time. For once, I wasn't replaying family arguments in my head or wishing for their approval. I was finally free of needing it. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible sister anymore. I was the woman who built her own empire and stood tall enough to make her absence felt. 3 days passed after I sent that email, and I didn't hear a word from David or my parents. I assumed it was over, that they would just erase me from their lives the way they'd always threatened to. But life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. It was Saturday morning when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, there stood David, not in the confident posture he always carried, but in a slumped, hesitant stance that almost made him look like a stranger. His eyes were tired, his expression unreadable. "David," I said cautiously. He gave a short, awkward nod. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside silently. He walked into the living room, glancing around like he couldn't quite believe where he was. The vast glass windows, the minimalist furniture, the awards on the shelf, every detail of my life that he had once mocked as unrealistic dreams was now tangible proof of how wrong he'd been. "I didn't realize you lived like this," he muttered, almost to himself. "You never asked," I said softly, pouring him a glass of water and setting it on the table. He sat down but didn't touch it. For a while, he just stared at the floor, as if searching for the right words. "The wedding didn't happen," he said finally. I nodded slowly. "I figured." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Emily called it off. She said she didn't want to start a marriage surrounded by lies and bitterness. She said if I could treat my own sister like an outsider, I probably wasn't ready to be anyone's husband." A flicker of guilt passed through me, but I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "You know," he said after a moment, "I used to think you were naive. I thought your dreams were just fantasies, that you didn't understand how the real world worked. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment." I leaned against the counter, my arms crossed. "And instead, you became the disappointment." He looked up sharply, but I didn't flinch. "My words weren't cruel, they were true." "Yeah," he said quietly. "I did. I see that now." He paused, his voice rough. "When Jennifer told me what you said on that call, I didn't believe it. I thought it was some kind of mistake. But then I checked the company records. Your name's everywhere. You own it all." I smiled faintly. "You finally did your research." "I had to," he said. "Because the idea that my little sister, the one everyone called a dreamer, the one I used to tease for being too soft, could build something like this, it didn't make sense. Not to me, not to anyone in the family." "Maybe it's not supposed to make sense to people who only see limits," I replied. "I didn't build this to prove you wrong, David. I built it because I believed I could even when you didn't." He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. "I know. And that's what hurts the most. You believed in yourself when no one else did, and I was too proud to see it." For a long time, neither of us spoke. The quiet was heavy, but not angry, just full of all the words that had gone unsaid for years. Finally, he whispered, "I'm sorry." It was such a simple phrase, yet it landed like a thunderclap. I didn't realize how long I'd waited to hear it. I walked over and sat across from him. "Do you even know what you're sorry for?" He looked up, his eyes glistening. "For all of it. For the things I said. For letting Mom and Dad talk about you like you were a failure. For calling you names. For believing that success had to look like mine. And for forgetting that you were always stronger than me." The sincerity in his voice cracked something inside me. I'd spent years building walls to keep the pain out, but in that moment, one of them crumbled. "I never wanted to fight with you, David," I said softly. "I just wanted you to see me, to see that I was trying. But you made it impossible to stand beside you without being treated like I didn't belong there." He nodded slowly. "I know. And I can't undo it. But if you'll let me, I want to try to make things right." I stared at him for a long time, searching for the boy I used to know, the one who used to protect me when we were kids before ego and pride poisoned everything. And for the first time in years, I caught a glimpse of him in the tired man sitting before me. "You can't change the past," I said quietly. "But maybe we can start with the truth." He looked up. "What truth?" "That family isn't about blood, David. It's about respect. It's about showing up for each other even when it's inconvenient. If you can do that, if you can stop measuring love by status or pride, then maybe we still have something worth saving." He nodded slowly, wiping at his eyes. "I'll try. I really will." We sat in silence again, the city light spilling across the room. There was no grand reconciliation, no dramatic hug, just quiet understanding, and for me, that was enough. Before he left, he stood by the door, looking hesitant. "Sophia, you really did all this by yourself?" I smiled. "No. I had help. Good people who believed in me when family didn't. But every success started with one thing: refusing to listen to the people who said I couldn't." He swallowed hard. "I wish I'd been one of those people." "Maybe someday you will be," I said softly. He nodded, his voice breaking. "I'll see you soon, okay? Take care, David." When the door closed behind him, I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where he had stood. The air felt lighter, and though my heart still ached, it wasn't from anger anymore. It was the ache of finally letting go, of accepting that not every wound needs revenge, some only need closure. That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, the waves crashing softly in the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the outcast of my family. I felt like the survivor, the one who learned to rise quietly, without anyone's permission. And as the wind brushed my hair, I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes, the sweetest form of revenge isn't payback. It's peace. A week passed after David's visit, and though things weren't magically fixed, something subtle had shifted inside me. The anger that once burned in my chest was gone, replaced by a quiet strength that felt steadier, more grounded. I didn't expect apologies from my parents anymore. I didn't expect understanding, either. For the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval to feel complete. Still, life has its own strange sense of timing. The following Sunday, I received an unexpected invitation. It wasn't printed or fancy, just a handwritten note delivered to my office. "Dinner. Our house. No excuses. Love, Mom." I stared at the note for a long moment, unsure whether to laugh or cry. It had been almost a year since I last stepped into my parents' home. The thought of walking back into that house, the same place where I had once been dismissed, belittled, and told I'd never be enough, stirred something complicated inside me. But in the end, I decided to go. Not for them, but for myself. When I arrived that evening, the house looked the same. The front porch light flickered faintly, the familiar scent of rosemary and lemon drifted from the kitchen, and for a moment, I felt the echo of childhood memories. My mother greeted me at the door, her eyes a little red, her face older somehow, not from age, but from regret. "Sophia," she said softly. "You came." I said I would, I replied simply. She stepped aside to let me in. The dining table was already set, a simple meal, not the elaborate displays she used to make for guests. My father was seated at the end of the table, his usual proud posture replaced by something quieter. When our eyes met, he gave a faint nod. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. We ate mostly in silence at first. Every clink of silverware felt like a reminder of all the words we'd swallowed over the years. Finally, my mother spoke. "We heard about David and Emily," she said carefully. I nodded. "I know. He's been thinking a lot," she continued. "About how he treated you. About how we all did." She looked down at her hands. "We didn't realize how much we hurt you until it was too late." I took a slow breath. "It's not too late, Mom. It's just different now." My father finally spoke, his deep voice steady but weary. "I was hard on you because I thought that's what would make you strong. I didn't see that you already were." The words were few, but they hit harder than any long apology could have. "I know you thought you were helping," I said quietly. "But strength doesn't come from being told you're not enough. It comes from believing you already are even when no one else does. He nodded slowly, looking older than I'd ever seen him. I'm proud of you, Sophia. Truly. It wasn't a grand reconciliation. There were no tears, no dramatic speeches. Just small, honest moments, fragile but real. And maybe that's all we ever needed. Later that evening, after dinner, my mother asked if I'd step out to the garden with her. The air was cool, and the sky shimmered with faint stars. She turned to me, her voice trembling slightly. Do you remember when you were little, how you used to sit out here and tell me you'd travel the world? I smiled faintly. You told me dreams like that were childish. I know, she said softly. And I was wrong. You didn't just travel the world, Sophia. You built one. Something in my chest tightened, and for the first time in years, I reached out and hugged her. She held me tight, like she was afraid I'd slip away again. In that embrace, the years of hurt didn't disappear, but they softened, just enough to let something new begin. When I left that night, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like someone who had lived through the fire and come out brighter on the other side. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about letting people off the hook, it's about freeing yourself from their shadow. A few days later, I returned to the resort chain's headquarters. The team was preparing for an upcoming expansion announcement, a new property opening overseas, something I'd dreamed about since the beginning. As I walked through the halls, greeting staff and checking plans, I caught sight of myself in the glass window, confident, calm, and finally at peace. Maria, my assistant, walked up with her usual bright smile. Ms. Martinez, the press wants a statement about the Ocean View expansion. Should I tell them you'll speak at the launch event? Yes, I said, smiling. This time, I'll tell my story myself. That evening, as the sun sank behind the skyline, I stood at the balcony overlooking the sea. The golden light shimmered across the water, the same sea that once seemed endless when I was a struggling dreamer, and now it reflected everything I had become. My phone buzzed once more, a message from David. Sophia. Mom and Dad told me about dinner. Thank you for going. I know things aren't perfect, but I'm glad you're giving us another chance. I've started working again. Trying to rebuild, properly this time. You were right about respect and about family. I'm proud of you, sis. David. For a moment, I stared at the message, tears welling up unexpectedly. Then I typed back. Proud of you too. Let's both keep building something real this time. I set the phone down and let the evening breeze wash over me. In the distance, the waves kept rolling, soft, endless, certain. I thought about the girl I once was, the one who sat alone in her tiny apartment, dreaming of success, aching for validation that never came. She had no idea that one day, she would build an empire, not out of revenge, but out of faith in herself, in her worth, in her ability to rise. Sometimes, the world tries to tell you who you are. It puts you in boxes, underestimates your power, and laughs at your dreams. But the truth is, no one defines your story but you. As the sun disappeared beyond the horizon, painting the sky in soft pink and gold, I whispered a quiet promise to myself to never let anyone make me feel small again. I wasn't the forgotten sister anymore. I was the woman who turned rejection into strength, silence into success, and pain into peace. And that, I realized, was the greatest revenge of all, living well, loving deeper, and never looking back.